Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the P and Applied Mathematics Seminar. It's a pleasure for me to open session 54 of this seminar. Today we have two excellent speakers, Nicola Bellomo and Adriano Alcanta. Introducing Nicola Bellomo, we have to Professor Roberto Capistrano. Thank you, Roberto. You can start.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, it's a pleasure from our seminar to welcome Professor Nicola Bellomo. Professor Nicola is a distinguished professor at the University of Granada and Professor Emeritus at the Polytechnic University of Torino. Professor Bellomo will talk about a multi-scale framework, a search for a unified approach toward modeling the COVID pandemic. Well, let me just tell you about a little bit about Professor Bellomo. Bellomo started his career in the 80s when he was called to cover the share of mathematical physics and applied mathematics due to his scientific achievement in the mathematical theory of the Boltzmann equation and the stochastic differential equation. He is author of 20 books and more than 100 papers devoted to modeling, analytic problems, simulations, vehicular traffic, and among other topics. And he has around 3,000 citations in MathSciNet. Additionally, Bellomo is also editor-in-chief at the Mathematical Models and Methods in Applied Science, okay, and received a lot of awards in Europe. I can cite at least 3. He was a president at the Italian Society of Industrial and Applied Mathematics, president of the Society of the Italian Highlight Citation, and awarded by the Italian president of the 3rd level honor for scientific merits. Okay, today Bellomo will give us this great opportunity to attend his lecture, Pandemic of SARS-CoV-2 and Society, a multi-scale activity, particles system approach. Okay, thank you very much, Professor. It's a pleasure for us to receive you here in our seminar. Okay, you can start.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the presentation. I do think that these initiatives are very important, especially now that traveling is still difficult. So I will be talking about a problem which is affecting our society, including, of course, Brazil, but also Europe. And this presentation has been prepared in collaboration with Diletta Borini, Perugia, Italy. So we know that COVID-19 has affected our minds, but also our well-being, economics, social problems, etc. And the lecture is devoted to a multi-scale vision of the pandemics, starting from the ENOST dynamics of a mutating, proliferating virus, contrasted by the immune systems under the action of therapeutic actions. Is in 3 parts. First, I will briefly introduce the mathematical tools which are needed to handle this problem. Actually, the mathematical tools should take into account of multi-scale, but also evolution and selection, as it is arguably represented in this Hesker beautiful design, the metamorphosis. And actually, this is the village where I was born many, many years ago, maybe once upon a time. So then I go to modeling and then perspectives to be possibly developed. I will refer to these 4 papers, sorry. The first 2 are open access, so they are available. You can get it rapidly. The other 2 are not, unfortunately, but you may simply ask to me if you are interested in that. Before going, I would like to mention that we are interested not in population dynamics. We must go beyond this viewpoint. And I mentioned 4 papers which deal with different aspects. They take into account heterogeneity, space distancing and vaccination, social problems, including loneliness, then movement along networks, and also the social impact of public policies. Actually, one common feature of this paper is that there are Brazilians and Argentine mathematicians as authors. So, first of all, reasoning. When we deal with a problem like that, a system like that, we don't have a background field theory. So we have to invent something. What I suggest to do is first to look for a mathematical structure suitable to capture the main complexity features of living systems. Then inserting microscale interactions as well as external actions leads to the derivation of models. We don't have a background field. We cannot do it, have it for living systems, but we capture the complexity features of all living systems. Then after, the story is very mathematical. We have analytic, computational problem, and of course, validation. The mathematical theory which is used has been published in this book 5 years ago, and it is based on several ideas, but the main one is the interacting entities are carriers of a strategy, which is called activity. And the active particles who play the game are modeled by probability distribution, actually distribution functions, because in some cases also the number of particles evolves in time. Then we have stochastic game theory, and we have finally the structure of the equation. I don't go into details, otherwise the lecture would be on this topic alone. But I want to stress one thing, that this kind of problems cannot be treated by a mathematician alone. It should be in collaboration with biologists, immunologists, virologists, and even a beautiful mind cannot do it. So we need an interdisciplinary way of thinking, not collaboration, but also mentality. So now we go to the modeling approach, and well, this is dedicated to Albert Camus, who was one of my favorite authors when I was in high school. And now we have also to take care of several things. If we look at these sort of networks, the central line refers to the host dynamics. We have a healthy population, which can be subject to vaccination, may get infected, and then go to hospital recovery if necessary, and intensive care if necessary. Then this story may end up with full recovery, or unfortunately death. But the healthy population is not in a closed domain with with boundaries. Is subject to sort of, say, communication networks, short and long distance and short distance, but also a great importance is given by social dynamics, including economics aspects. What happens inside? So I go back again to, the model cannot say simply how many persons are infected. Should say much more, should say which people need hospitalization, which need intensive care, those who are recovered and those who will die. So we have to say a lot, even too much maybe for a poor mathematician. Anyway, inside we have the dynamics between the proliferative virus and the immune system. First, the defense is by innate immunity, then slowly the innate immunity becomes the adaptive immunity by learning the presence of the virus. All this should enter into equations. And what also one aspect is important. The contagion is not macroscopic. Here the multi-scale starts, because the contagion is more or less intense depending on the viral charge of the individual who is transferring the contagion. So we may have an individual very dangerous in terms of contagion, but also how long the two persons are in contact. So contagion is already a complex dynamics, and then the dynamics depends on what is happening at the low scale. We will get back to this. Then there is this figure represents the dynamics in a visual way. I don't give additional details, but I summarize the key points a mathematical model, a mathematical description should provide. The approach is multi-scale for the problem I was mentioning before, but propagation in the territory is macroscopic and say networked. So this is an additional difficulty. The contagion probability, as mentioned, depends on the level of infection. Then there is the competition, but in the competition is not the end of the story, because the virus can have mutations and selections. The new variants, some of the new variants may be less aggressive and disappear, but some of them may become more aggressive. So it is important in the defense that the pandemic is not neglected, because if the virus can live well, it will produce new mutating virus. Vaccination is a strong defense against these dynamics. So we have to take into account several aspects. Now I skip over these slides because we will see them more practically in the equations. But we consider, I don't use the word population, because they're not simply population, because the population is somehow anonymous. This is a heterogeneous distribution of individual entities which are carrier of a biological function, but also social, etc. And these are called, in the terminology of the active particles theory, are called functional subsystems. So we consider healthy people, vaccinated, infected by the primary virus, infected by the variants, individuals who after vaccination are infected again, recovered, and death. So one may think that this rich number of individual entities may generate a very highly complex system. No, we succeeded to have a rather simple, mathematically simple description. So the strategy, the rationale which leads to the model is highly complex, but the model is not so bad, not so. So the simplest one is the model in absence of variants and vaccinations. So the very beginning, but however important, because we must know what would happen without variants and without vaccination, and then compare what happens due to variants, then this is going to be worse, and vaccination, which will mitigate. So after this initial model, we move to the case of variants. So the nasty ghost is a variant of the original virus, and this nasty ghost gives a lot of problems, and we have to understand what happens in absence of vaccination to come to the final model, which includes 7 equations, and then we account of several dynamics, which all of them are important. Actually, you will notice something strange. I use partial derivative for a system which apparently it is an ordinary differential equation, but it is not, because F are probability distribution. So to distinguish it from the case of ordinary differential equation, I use this notation, which are very, very familiar for the crazy people who used to study the Boltzmann equation, which actually is one of the most difficult equations of mathematical physics. So, well, I've not said very much, but I can explain now what kind of simulation we want to do. Actually, the simulation corresponds to the 3 classes of models I gave before, bearing in mind that simulations are deemed to develop a sort of parameter sensitivity analysis. And what is the real objective of the simulation? It consists in providing the scenarios of what can happen qualitatively and quantitatively. And the model doesn't solve the problem of COVID, but by giving the scenarios, provides the information to the crisis managers. And then if the crisis managers are manipulated by politics, this is another story. But mathematics will provide the scenarios. So I will say also important that we don't have too many parameters. Because if we have too many parameters, the scenarios may be rich, but not useful. So we consider a certain dynamics which is somehow similar to what we have been living in this period. So we have a locking time, not full locking, we have a parameter, a locking parameters, simulating what is forbidden. And then after a certain time, we have a delocking parameter, which corresponds to more freedom, not full freedom, but more freedom. Then we consider the defense of the immune system, the proliferative ability of the virus, and the initial number of the contagion. This is very important. Some people say, well, I had a COVID and then it passed away very rapidly. Some others go to hospital and even worse than that. Well, those who survive and have it something like a little more than a cold, then this is due to two things. Small initial contagion, size of the initial contagion small, good defense ability. And we, all of us, do not have the same defense ability. This is very heterogeneous in the population and depends on many things, including alimentation, what you eat, and so on. So if we study what can happen if we study the first locking period and then the delocking period once the virus appears to have disappeared. But it is not like that. Even a small number of individuals make the virus restart again. So depending on the delocking action, say the amount of freedom we give, we have anyway a second wave. And the second wave may be much worse than the first one. And when, for instance, the amount of freedom given is high, then it reduces if you respect some limit. For instance, we now discuss in Europe, now the mask is not obligatory anymore in public transportation. This is absolutely crazy, because one person in an underground can infect 30, 50 persons in the same vehicle. So, and then you can figure out during the high traffic. But if we control, we can have, after the locking, a better situation, even a very small one, which ultimately ends with a flat behavior, which is already something very close to zero, but not zero, very close to zero, and can generate the third wave. Once we were saying the first wave, the second wave, the third wave. Now, no, we don't even know how many waves we have. So now let us try to understand the role of variants in their dominance over the primary virus. What is a variant? During the reproduction, the virus puts a portion of his DNA in the epithelial cells. There, the baby viruses start proliferating. They make 100, even 1,000. Out of this huge amount of viruses which invade the respiratory tracts, then there may be one which is better suited to the environment. because as a mutation of this DNA and general structure of the surface of the virus, which makes him more with greater ability to invade. And this neovirus has a higher proliferative ability. And again, we must have the initial number of infected people, the load in the host, but also the initial number of the virus, mutated virus, generally much smaller than the previous one. So what happens? So we have a first wave, and in some cases, depending on the quality of the amount of the initial data, but also on the aggressivity, the variant already starts dominating the primary virus. And if we open too early, namely before the end of the wave, but here, then this is a very good news for the variant, very bad news for the population. So we have to be very careful on the selection of the locking time. So what happens with vaccination? Well, vaccination helps. This is the situation in absence of vaccination. Then we can have a situation where after the first wave, which differs for the different population, then the second wave shows a behavior much more, say, less aggressive than the previous wave. Well, we should try to summarize. These are just examples. We need hundreds of simulations to get out some say, indication, reliable indication. You see, the more active is the vaccination, we can really not destroy the virus, but reduce it very much. Why not destroy? Because we have no vax people. Even in other infections like the poliomyelitis, there was the fact that all children were vaccinated, all of them. Now there is the theory that vaccination is dangerous, and we should compare this situation with this one, which is better, and we may even improve it. So the variant becomes prevalent already during the first wave, while the second wave fully dominates the primary virus. Simulations show that vaccination decreases the number of infected individuals, increasing the values of the vaccination action leads to a better situation. But also, crisis manager should care about decreasing or increasing the values of the delocking time. The soonest it is applied, the worse the situation is. The higher is the level of freedom that the locking gives, the worse the situation appears. Of course, infected individuals increase their defense against the virus, so this is taken into account by the model. There are analytic problems which have not been solved yet, but in this moment it is not so much important doing analytic problems because we have modeling problems which are dominant. But what is very interesting that the modeling predicts what is happening, namely an endemic state for the whole population. The virus does not disappear. It's there at low levels, ready to start again. And another thing is that mutation were in the populations with higher number of vaccinated persons. So, what we should do? Well, as I mentioned before, analytic problems are important for a devoted mathematician. So occasionally I like proving theorems, but in this moment we should use science. I mean, not only mathematics, but science in the full generality, including mathematics, to have a dialogue with society, and the dialogue is mediated by crisis managers. So, which are the perspectives? Well, I focused on the support to crisis managers in a population. And just we have to remember the flow chart I have seen before, but studying all details cannot be done by a mathematician alone, although if he collaborates with a virologist and immunologist. A team is necessary. The team is made by different specialists who tackle the 10 boxes of this flow chart. Maybe less than 10, but anyway, a team is. So we have to work with the systems approach in the overall vision, an extended study of vaccination program. This has not been done extensively, say different individuals in the society, protect with weak individual, age, and so and so. Open a dialogue with crisis manager and inquire which kind of information they need. A mathematician can have some fantasy, but cannot invent everything. And then if we do it, we can have an interactive platform to be given to the crisis manager. This is a dream. It's not reality. It's a perspective, but it is a dream which needs financial support, ideas, people, etc., etc. So, since I believe very much in communication via internet in this situation, I bring to your attention an open access 5-lecture course. You can register, you can connect, it is open access, and after registration you can download both the contents of the PDF of the lectures and also the videos. Actually, for some reasons, I don't know, this doesn't work on Sunday. Probably even the internet has some hostility to work on Sunday. Indeed, it's not so bad. When I was a young man, I used to play football on Sundays. So also I bring to your attention this book. This book is an edited book with 10 chapters, and this will be repeated in the next future. So I wish to thank the people who have collaborated in this research, and you can see that everything is there. We have a virologist, mathematicians, mathematicians expert in biology, economist, immunologist, computer sciences, etc., etc. And also, I would like to conclude just mentioning that I do believe that the pandemic is not a black swan, but it is it witnesses the fragility of our global system. And the system is globally connected. If you kill something, then the damage go to everyone. And with this, I thank the organizers and the audience, and I'm ready to discuss with you if you have any questions.
Thank you, Professor Nicola. It's a very nice talk. Let me open for questions and comments. Juan, please, you can open all the microphones for the audience. Okay, it's open. Está aberto. It's open the microphone. Alex, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. So I was so I'm understanding correctly the wave behavior that you see in the model that's presented is a function essentially of the contact rate, right? So for a constant contact parameter, you would get a steady state solution.
Yeah, well, it depends on several parameters. So it's not only the contact, but the locking and the locking time, the aggressivity of the virus, and the ability of the immune defense. So if you play with these parameters, then you can compare the second wave with the first one. This is in the case of absence of variance. If you add the variance, then you have a richer description, and you can observe how the scenarios develops due to the presence of the variance, and then you must have an aggressivity estimate of the variance. Now, what is important to say, I have not mentioned, is that the number of parameters is, after all, not so large. And with that, if you have some data, some reliable data, then you can effectively estimate them. Actually, they are in average, because the immune defense, as I said, is a very individual parameter. And but you can make, computers can make miracles nowadays. You can put a hypothesis of distribution and see what happens. The equation is not so bad to disturb the computer, only 7 strings, nothing. But what is important is a clever play with the parameters in a perspective of artificial intelligence, not just to play with.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, more questions or comments? Well, if the one of the people in the audience would to send a message in the chat, I can read. Okay, feel free, use a chat or the microphone.
Where can we find the slides?
The slides, if it's not available on the website, you simply send me a message and I will send you the slides.
Okay.
But if you want the slides of a richer, with a richer description, then you go to the course. to the course, the website of the course, and then you have much more. But in any case, these slides are available to everyone. I can send to the organizers one Limajo, and he will do it as he like. I mean, no problem. I have already given my slides to the organizers.
Okay. Professor, just a curiosity. Do you believe with the advance of the technology and the math tools, we can, in the future, for example, predict some problems with pandemics or something like that?
Some problems with
the pandemic, with another pandemic or something like that?
Yeah, but I mean, arguably, mathematics, as I said before, doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
Math can provide scenarios. These scenarios depend also on the fantasy of the modelist. So the modelist is not anonymous, is a thinking person, and he can figure out various possibilities. But as I mentioned before, this is cannot be an academic standing alone. And in addition, I mean, I am an old man. In addition, I am reluctant to take a younger researcher and say, you do this work, because the academy is not so keen to accept interdisciplinary matter, etc., etc. So when I got my chair many years ago, well, I had to prove some existence theorems for the Boltzmann equation. Otherwise, no one would have promoted me. After, I am doing what I like, but before I couldn't.
Okay. Well, more comments or questions? Well, if not, thank you very much, Professor, for this nice, beautiful talk today. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone, and I'm ready to give you information anytime.
Okay.
Bye.
Oh, thank you, Roberto, and thank you a lot, Professor Nicola Bellomo, for your amazing talk.